In today's show, we discuss, is science a fact-based or opinion-based methodology?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh, you always instill that wonderment in me every time I ask you how you Anyway, I'm not going to ask you to say hi to the audience. I'm going to do it as normal. Hello, audience. Welcome back. I won't ask Tayo to say hi to you lot because you know his reaction from past shows. Now, today's show we're discussing, is science fact-based or is it opinion-based? And it's something that Tayo has got a beef about. So I'm going to ask him first, do you want to kick this off, please?
To me, it's apparent. In a way, it is very reminiscent of the fandom, if you like. The fandom being those fans who are aware of what's going on behind the scene with some of the major entertainment movie outfits, such as Disney. Now, if you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, they refer to people, and I suppose I'd have to say you, Tony, as normies. You just go to the cinema, you just take out your money, you just pay, you go sit down, you enjoy your movie, and you leave. And that's good, that's all well and good. It's in science today, you have the normies who believe in science and scientists, and then you have the equivalent of the fandom, the people who know what's going on, who see what's going on. I mean, I will never use the expression woke because nowadays that means something else. The woke means something else. But in a sense, the people who are switched on and tuned in to what's really going on in science.
So go on then.
I would be one of those.
Okay. So what differentiates you from a scientist? Have you got a scientific background, or you studied, you've got a PhD? Do you have all those facets in order to say with authority that these scientists are talking hogwash? Because that's basically what you're implying. And people like me are just going along with whatever science says without fact checking it. But because they're talking about things that are not in my level of study, I can't talk with authority. I have to, at some point, give them the credence that they've studied it and I've known what they talk about. I only know the periphery of a subject. They'll know it far deeper. And I then rely on other people not associated with those people to corroborate what they're saying, because my level of knowledge isn't at that level. And I have to accept that. I have to accept my limitation in knowledge. I can't have an arrogance in my thinking, well, they must be talking nonsense. So I have to back up my claim and say, why are they talking nonsense? Because it doesn't feel right. I can't use that. That's ignorance on my part. So I want to know where you're coming from in saying what you're saying, where normies like me accept science as is when they come up with the statements they do, but intellectuals like yourself, if that's what I can name you, think differently.
All right. So I actually laughed while you were saying that. It's very funny to me. Do I have a PhD? No. Was I trained in science? It depends what you mean by that. I did a course based on science. I did building. It's actually, my degree is actually in building science. So, yeah, I've got some mathematics, not enough to get me onto the podium with Einstein.
Okay.
I've got some engineering and things like that. I know I got some A-levels in in science, maths, physics, chemistry.
Yeah.
All right, so not a nutty, but by no means am I one of those who could be in the building of the Academy of Sciences. However, when you were speaking, I couldn't just help but just chuckle a bit. Now, the best thing to do is not to be too, I don't use the expression intellectual, but I don't want to be too academic. I don't want to lose people. So I'm going to paint a metaphor for you. We both own cars, but neither of us, I think, is a mechanic.
Indeed.
However, if you turn on your car, switch it on, rather than turn it on, I'm not trying to suggest any sexual malfeasance here. If you switch on your car and you hear a strange sound, you go, oh, that's strange. You're not a mechanic, but you can identify when something is off.
Yeah, okay.
We don't need to be PhDs. You're asking us to be subject area matters because it suits your purpose, not because it's actually relevant. The other day, we were having a discussion in one of our early episodes, and I accused you of outsourcing your intelligence. You should never outsource your intelligence. Your intelligence is the one thing that distinguishes you from 99.9% of all the other species, and I use that particular number on purpose, as you know.
It isn't quite that number, but okay. We won't keep our audience bemused by that number. We will explain it. Go on, carry on.
Yes, and you must always listen for the kotok, 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 kotok sounds in other people's arguments. And when you hear that sound, when something is off, you go, oh, okay, hang on. Let's just have a little think about this. Then you should be able to ask that person, would you care to explain that sound? Now, if you were standing next to two mechanics, one says, ooh, that sounds like your engine has knocked. I think you would say that is a good possibility. Whether it's right or wrong, we don't know until we expect the engine. But at least it's a sensible possibility. But the other mechanic says, oh, that is the sound of the white-breasted cockatoo. And you must have a white-breasted cockatoo in your engine. You think, white-breasted cockatoo, first of all, I don't even think there's such a thing as a white-breasted cockatoo. And second, why would it be in the engine? And thirdly, why is it making that sound consistently and constantly? Do animals make sounds and then they shut up, and then they make sounds again and then they shut up? Okay. This only happens when the engine is working. The guy says, well, that's because you're disturbing the cockatoo's sleep. You see, you think, well, that doesn't really gel. That really sounds kind of silly. I'm going to go with the mechanic who gives me a mechanical, sensible reason for the sound I'm hearing, at least until further inspection. And then when you do more and more experiments, the second mechanic is always giving excuses for why you can't find the cockatoo, why there are no signs of scat, why there are no feathers. He's always giving excuses. He never actually produces any flipping evidence for his flipping cockatoo.
Okay.
But the other guy is showing you, if you do this and if you do that, this is what you expect to see, and that's what you actually see.
Okay.
Now, in the same way, in science, there's this very fundamental argument, which is evolution. And a lot of people now
talking science in general. You're picking one particular area.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm just big. This is very early in our discussion. You don't let me sort of build up my argument here.
Okay.
So a lot of people go, time evolution. Oh God. Well, it's very fundamental to the way we look at science today. It's extremely fundamental in that the scientists who believe in evolution are like the second mechanic. There's an awful lot of speculation and no hard evidence. No hard evidence for goo to zoo. There's hard evidence, and nobody actually disputes it, by the way. Nobody that I know disputes it, for variation, for short-beaked finches on Galapagos Island number 1 and long-beaked finches on Galapagos Island number 2. That's variation. They're both finches.
Mm-hmm.
What we don't have is any evidence whatsoever. When I say any, I underline it 3 times, and I say any, and I challenge anybody. Where is the evidence for goo to zoo?
Right.
For starting out with something that doesn't have a major physiological feature, and it gives birth to something that has a novel physiological feature, which must have happened, apparently, if you take evolution. So if we now find a situation where we can't get anti-evolution points of view across, what is it? It's not based on evidence. It's actually based on consensus. And there's been this creep into science because of this one fundamental thing called evolution, this argument, fundamental argument. And actually, to be honest with you, it's not a scientific question, as many people have pointed out. It is actually a philosophical question. What is the nature of the universe? Is it accidental or created? Is it designed or not designed? And this goes back to people's basic belief systems. And it has crept, it's spread out, not just into science, but into the fabric of our society. Because if you really believe that you're nothing but an automated lump of mud, then obviously you're free to do whatever you want because it doesn't really matter. On the other hand, if the universe was designed, then maybe there is a purpose to life, and maybe you can't go around doing exactly anything and everything you want to do, because you might be going against the designer's design, if you like. The designer's
the designer's purpose.
No. I was trying to avoid. See, I don't want to say purpose.
Okay.
The
designer's
intent of
instructions.
No, the intent of the design.
Okay, which is?
No, I don't know. I'm saying if there's a design to a car, if a car has been designed, it's probably been designed to go certain speeds, for instance.
Right.
So if you overspeed, you'll probably damage the engine. I'm not trying to say that it's something like divine. That's why I was trying to avoid that thing about this divine, divinity or something. It's just that this is the way it works. And if you go with the way it works, you'll be in harmony with the design. But if you don't, there will be disharmony, and therefore there'll be discomfort and suffering. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that there's an instruction manual in the Bible, 10 commandments or something like this. But
that doesn't mean what you're saying makes some sense for sure, but you've just thrown some flippant points there regarding how you behave. It's almost implying that if you don't behave in the manner that you should, your controller, creator, or whatever it was that started it all off is somehow upset. So
I'm not saying he's upset. You've upset the design. I've said if you take your car around a sharp bend at 20 miles an hour, I'm sure you'll be fine. If you try to take it around at 70 miles an hour, you're going to crash. It doesn't upset the designer of the car. It doesn't upset the designer of the car. It doesn't really care. It's up to you to understand the design. It's up to you to understand the design of the car and to go the appropriate speed around this particular corner. That's all.
Okay, but what's that got to do with science and the theme of our topic?
It has two kinds of outlooks in life. Those who believe the universe is designed and is a purpose of life, and those who don't. This underpins the fundamental argument in science, which is based on that difference in outlook. Now, in the old days, the scientific method was very well established. Observation, experimentation, repeatable experimentation, form the hypothesis, test it. That's science. That's what it's supposed to be. But nowadays, it's whether or not you agree with the general consensus. If the consensus is that human beings evolved from apes, then you better go along with it because that's the science. You can't get your human beings did not evolve from apes papers into modern journals. So when people say
it's not strictly true, what you're saying.
It is strictly true. It is strictly true. I want you to show me any journal that has published anything which challenges evolution, which has been published in the last 15 or 20 years. I'll say 15 years. Go for it. If you want to postpone this and come back to it, postpone this.
No. What I'm saying is there has been some recent scientific analysis that has been challenged, and now it's being looked at seriously.
So
one of them
yep.
is Age of Dinosaurs. okay, where there's been, many examples of saying they died out 65 million years ago, but now there's some new evidence that has been repeated that has indicated that dinosaurs are actually still on the earth, maybe 30,000-40,000 years ago. So humans could have shared the planet while humans came into existence with dinosaurs. Now, that is still being tested. It's not been thrown out. It has been not proven 100%, but it's being proven. So they've discussed it. So science will look at different alternatives if there is some evidence. And in this instance, there has been some evidence brought forward. So now they are looking at not carbon dating itself, but they're looking at whether their original evidence wasn't actually measured correctly as new scientific processes have been discovered. So you saying that it's already poo-pooed, a decision's been made, it's no longer addressed, that's not true. It's whether some previous scientific methodology has been challenged. If there's some basis for it with some evidence, then the science community will peer review it and form an opinion and see whether it is valid. And the key there is peer review. It's not dismissed out of hand in any way, shape, or form. It's reviewed. And if there's enough people, independent people, who look at that evidence and think, actually, that actually makes sense, they will review it and they will publicize it.
If there are enough people who have that consensus, is that what you're saying?
They peer review it, yes.
So if there's enough people who have the consensus, is that what you're saying?
Not enough people, but
well, did you not actually say enough people?
I didn't say enough people, but I just said a few peer reviews.
We can go back on the recording. Did you not say enough people? I'm laughing now because you said enough people.
I don't know. I think enough peers that have to review stuff. Yeah.
So if there's enough, if there's
I think
consensus,
it's more than one.
If there's consensus, you're saying, isn't that what we're arguing about now? That it's all about consensus? Isn't that exactly the point of this discussion? Because have you not just conceded that you need consensus? Because what is peer review but consensus?
Yes,
really.
That's how things have been brought forward.
Well, there we go. So you are agreeing with me that this science nowadays is based on consensus, because you've just said now that your peer review, you insist on it being peer reviewed. You need a consensus. Why do you need a consensus? Why can't it be a repeatable experiment? Can I repeat that experiment?
That's the whole point.
No, a repeatable experiment is not consensus. I can repeat your experiments or I cannot. There's no consensus about it. If you say throw up an apple, hold on, excuse me. If you say throw up an apple to fall back to the ground, you've made a claim. I don't need to. I want to use another adverb for consent. I don't need to agree with you. What I can do is I can take that apple and throw it up in the air and see whether it falls down to the ground.
Yeah.
If it falls back to the ground, you've made your point. There's no consensus about it.
Because the way science works is peer review, no matter what you say. Because
that's not how it works. That is not how it's worked.
For 300 years.
It has not. That is not the way it's worked. The way it's worked was repeatable experiments. Yes. Person A did the experiment. He published his paper, whether people agreed with it or not. He published the experiment.
Yes.
And that was all that was needed. Then other people tried the experiment. That's not consensus.
That's exactly how it
testing.
Works, even now.
Excuse me, we're going to start arguing about the meaning of consensus. You know very well that you're wrong. You do know that, because what you're trying is if people don't do the experiment, it doesn't mean that the person was wrong.
That's what I'm saying. They're not saying they're wrong.
Well, you're saying that it has to be peer reviewed. So if it's not peer reviewed and yet it is right, according to you, it's not science.
It's right.
Because all he needs to do is publish the experiment. So your journal should only be accepting people's experimental ideas. Yeah. That's all. And they should not be prejudging.
That's not how science works. It works on
that is how it's supposed to work.
No, it's not.
A fact is somebody's experiment that he says Tony Fusulo, can carry out.
Okay.
So if he cannot publish it so that you know that experiment exists, how the heck are you supposed to carry it out?
Okay, let me give you an example then. I'm going to provide a fact sheet that I've done an experiment on a cross-section of the public. Okay. And I've come with and this is my, let's say, a psychological experiment. And I'm going to tell you now, I have done this experiment and I've factually proven it because I've got the answers in front of me now from this consensus, and I've done the questions, and I've found that of the population, we have 98% racism in this country. There you go. I've done the test. There, bank it.
Now publish that.
Yeah, publish
Now
it.
publish it, publish your controls, publish what you did. Let's have a look at it. And then I can go out and do precisely the same thing and see whether you're right.
Yeah,
that
you
is
could come up
science.
with a different answer.
Well, that is science now. I'll do the thing I say, sorry, it didn't pan out the way you said. When I did it, I found there's only 20%. So
exactly. You know why? Because when I showed you my facts, I only interviewed white male men. You see, I produced my paper, and it's absolutely right, but my study was biased. It was unconscious bias. I happened to pick this demographic of people. So my analysis is, although correct with that demographic, it's flawed as a factual-based methodology, which is saying that...
What point are you trying to make with this?
I'm trying to make a point that you can't just release anything based on information you've collated. You need it to be double-checked by a peer who then conducts the same experiment. If they wanted to conduct the same demographic and say, yeah, he's right, amongst white males, then the racism is 98%. So he's absolutely right.
And what's wrong? A, what would be wrong with that? B, I think if you publish that in any serious journal, people would pretty much straight away say, why are you only picking on white males? But maybe that is what you want. Hang on. Maybe that is why that is the demographic you were looking into, was white males. No, so does that automatically mean? All they would say is, would you please cross out society and make it white males?
Right, thank you. Peer review to alter my findings. Correct. There you go. You've actually agreed with me, because that's exactly what the peer review process does. It will say, oh, by the way, have you considered this?
They don't have to be peers.
No, they don't.
They don't have to be peers. I said, and you can check it on the recording, I said anybody can do your experiment. Why does it have to be a peer? Your experiment stands by itself. Anybody with a clipboard can go out. Right, so stop using peer.
Some of the things that your
experiment stands or fails on its own.
Indeed.
It doesn't require other people to agree with you.
Okay. But if a mechanic says, by the way, this is what I think I'm going to adjust the engine for, I'm not going to get Joe Bloggs to test it. I'm going to get another mechanic, because he knows how a car works. Do you see what I'm saying? So if a scientist is coming up with a theory or a discovery or something,
you're changing context here. You're changing context. Nobody said get Joe Bloggs. My original point said there were two mechanics. I'm not going to concede and let you bring in Joe Bloggs. Who the hell is Joe Bloggs now? I don't know.
You're implying that a peer...
because of what I said.
Yeah.
Oh, because of what I said.
Has got to be someone of equal standing. It doesn't have to be a fellow scientist, but someone who at least knows about the subject and is a subject matter expert. Otherwise, how can they repeat the experiment? Because the experiments, most of the time, are so complex that you need someone who's a subject matter expert in order to verify it and ensure that your practices, in order to come to your conclusions, are correct.
I want us to distinguish between I need us now to distinguish between what consensus and repeatable experiments, because repeatable experiments, the way you're trying to swing it now, repeatable experiments is actually looking for consensus. That's the way you're trying to spin it. You're spinning it to suit your purposes. We were distinguishing between people who don't have any evidence, so there is no experiment. Remember when I said, show me one, and I said just one example of macro evolution. Where is the experiment that proves macro evolution? So when I talk about consensus, I'm talking about people. I mean, you won't need consensus. The pure form of consensus is agreement in something that can't be proved. That is the actual meaning of consensus within the context of this discussion. When we're saying that scientists agree things by consensus, the reason I brought up experiments is that you don't need consensus. You just need to carry out the experiment. If you say throw up an apple and it'll fall back to the ground.
Indeed. But that's a simple example.
That is an experiment that you can carry out.
Yeah,
Scientists can carry it. I can carry it. The whole point is it doesn't need consensus, and that's the point I was trying to make by bringing it up. But you're trying to twist it into
You're right. With theory of evolution, it seems to have been at the time the best model for the explanation. It's not the only model. It's the best one. And because there is no evidence on any of the alternatives, there aren't, despite what you're saying, there aren't, that's the best model that was adopted. So they had to stick with a model, but they're not saying it's faultless.
When you say that there's no evidence for my position, let me start with this. Number one, can you point to information which arises naturally in the world today from a source that we know to be natural and not from the mind of not from an intelligent mind? So I'll ask the question again. Can you point to anywhere in the universe where information arises naturally in a proven fashion? That is, you can prove that information arises naturally.
You've lost me.
Can you prove by pointing to anything in the universe, and I say prove, and I want proof, I don't want storytelling. Can you prove that in the entire universe, information arises anywhere naturally?
I can't, because we've never been that far to beyond the realm.
Can you do it on Earth, on planet Earth? Can you point to anything where information arises by itself?
By itself. When you talk about information, what do you mean? Could you quantify that? Yeah,
information. That is to say, something that is non-repeating sequence of instructions, if you like, non-repeating sequence.
Instructions. So you're talking intelligence outside of our realm of stuff, without a sentient being producing it.
I don't know about that. I don't know about
because a dog. I've seen a dog on YouTube howl and sing a song which sounded more like a tune, and it's not human, but it's created something, and it's information because it sounds like a tune because it's heard it over and over again and it howled it. So it's almost singing. Now, if you're thinking that at that level,
I am thinking there's going to be issues with that anyway, because I don't know how you even prove that a dog doesn't have a mind. So I don't know how you say.
I didn't say that.
Well, so I'm saying I don't want so mechanically, like a mechanical creation, something where it just spontaneously arises information.
Well, AI does that. It creates
AI was created by human minds. There is no natural.
Agreed. It didn't come from nothing.
AI was created by human minds. It's not naturally occurring in the environment. We need something that just occurs naturally, because AI comes from humans built it, and it didn't occur. It didn't happen by itself. Anything else?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Nobody's aware of it. I don't know why it took such a long time. There is no such thing. Okay. Every instance we have seen of information has come from a mind.
Okay.
So when we look at DNA, which packs a lot of information in it, the natural conclusion is that it came from a mind. It is unnatural to say that it arose spontaneously.
No, because you can't prove it either way.
I can't prove it, but what I'm saying is what fits the evidence. You already said is we don't have any evidence. What has more evidence is my position. Your position, the evolutionist position, has less evidence. Everywhere we have seen information, it is always arisen from a mind. So when we see information, it's just another way of encapsulating the watch in the forest. You come across a watch, you look at the complexity, you look at how everything is designed to work with everything else, and you come to the conclusion that an intelligence was behind it. It's a very old argument, but we're just pointing out that DNA has information in it. DNA is an instruction set. It is an instruction manual. I don't know if people actually listen to this know that. Mm-hmm. It's got more instructions in it than many encyclopedias. And the instruction tells the environment how to build proteins. And the proteins tells the environment how to build living things. That's how it works. But when we talk about a computer program, for instance, no one thinks a computer program, which is infinitely less sophisticated, the most complicated computer program in the world is like silly putty compared to DNA of, say, a microbe. Mm-hmm. It's like silly putty. It's like children's ABC book.
Yeah.
Nobody says that can happen spontaneously by itself. Mm-hmm. Yet, you're asking me to swallow the evolutionist point of view that it happened spontaneously and all by itself.
All right.
And so that's my evidence number one.
Can I just move along from there?
That's evidence
We're going on about the DNA. How come the DNA, if we got a DNA from a human, we got DNA from a dog, we got a DNA from an ape, we got a DNA from a silkworm, they've all got DNA. So that would imply that the DNA is shared. Now, there's differences in the DNA. It
doesn't imply any such thing. What do you mean it's shared?
Well, hold on. There's commonalities between them.
So what? So what? What the heck? Are you saying that the commonalities between every single house on this planet? There are doors and windows. Every single house that people live in.
Okay. How come eye structure?
Is it the same?
Structure is the same across many species. So they must have shared.
I'll just give you an example where nothing shared anything. It's just the way the designer would design something.
Okay. If it's designed, why is the designer not in touch with his creation? Okay, go on. Why are you laughing?
Well, because what the heck are you asking, man? Why is the designer not in touch with his creation?
Yeah, right.
Why should he be?
Okay, so he created
Why on earth should he be? Who? If you don't see your designer, when you meet him eventually, feel free to take him to task.
Okay.
What the heck are you talking about?
You're saying
what if we're in a simulation?
Okay.
What if we are in a simulation?
Yeah. I think that
in a simulation, if you were playing the simulation, do you go into the simulation as yourself? No, exactly. So what the heck do you mean? Look, that's a non-issue. Let's not go there. That doesn't even make any sense.
But why? Okay, so we are in a simulation.
No, I'm not saying we are. I'll just give you an example for your question. We could be in a simulation. Maybe it's that. So asking, I have no reason. I have no idea why design doesn't interact with us. I don't see why he would or should or wants to. Maybe he doesn't give a hoot. And so what?
Okay.
Frankly, what we're asking about is do scientists have the right to foist their opinions on us as science? This is where I'm going with this question: that do modern scientists use consensus or what we understand as science? You see, they're hiding behind what we understand as science. They're hiding behind repeatable experiments. They're pretending that when they do science today, it's all about repeatable experiments. Only it isn't. It's all about consensus. And that's my point. That's the point I'm trying to make here.
Is that across the piece, or is it only on this particular one?
No, it has bled out. Remember when I was going on about these fundamentals between those who believe that life is designed and those who believe that life occurred naturally, spontaneously. It has bled out. It is infected our society. Our society is suffering from the ravages of this thing now. If you don't believe that we're going to have to mark this up as an adult show. If you don't believe that your penis was designed basically to penetrate the vagina, then you're free to poke it into a man's bottom and say that you're practicing sex. On the other hand, if you believe that it's designed to do something, then that poking into a man's bottom and saying you're doing sex doesn't make any sense. Likewise, if you believe that your tongue is for tasting food, then there's no reason why your tongue as a woman should be on another woman's vulva. That doesn't make any sense. You are misusing it from a point of view of the design. And I've always...
Without the instruction book on how we use the design, and without any guidance of how we use the design, we are discovering how to use a design in our own manner.
It always depends on your objectives. If your objective is to extract pleasure, you can use these organs or physiological or anatomy, pieces of anatomy. You can use them as you like to extract a hedonistic lifestyle. It's all about extracting pleasure. So you can do that. I can use my car to drive my family from point A to point B, or I can use it to drive into a crowd and kill people. It's just the same car. Do I really need an instruction manual to tell me not to drive it into a bunch of people? Is that what must that be put inside? Must that be put inside my car's manual? Don't use this car to kill people, to drive into a bunch of people? I don't think so. I think ordinary common sense and your conscience.
Common sense and conscience.
Tell you together. Well, the thing that tells you not to drive your car into a bunch of people without being told, without anybody actually having told you don't drive your car into a bunch of people, you wouldn't do it normally.
because you don't want to harm a human being.
Well,
That
there we
seems
go.
to be something there, but then some people choose to do that. So,
Well,
hey.
there you go. They are like the second group of people I'm talking about, the ones who misuse the design, the thing they've been given.
Which
They
you
misuse it.
actually,
They
if I can
extract it.
refer back to you, you must be one of those people, because you actually want to execute your fellow man, especially politicians, because you've said so in many occasions. So you're misusing your vehicle, your human body from what it was originally intended, surely.
That's quite a leap.
So really, science is a fact-based way
It's meant to
of.
be.
No, but it is.
No, it isn't.
Unless it's talking about things like evolution in your book, because the rest can be proven by experiments.
Well, you see, you say that, but listen, I've asked you this before. Why is the universe 13.5 billion years old? It's not 13.5 billion years old because we've done experiments or conducted experiments to show that it's 13.5 billion years old. It's 13.5 billion years old because that's the amount of time that scientists believe is needed in order for life to arise spontaneously.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because
I
there
promise you
are
that's the
some
reason.
galaxies that have now been proven.
Nah, don't use the word proof.
Well, they've worked out then mathematically that it is taken nearly 12 billion light years.
They're using the
get here.
redshift. They're using redshift analysis. Okay?
I would like.
They're
Okay.
using redshift analysis. What you can do is you can just quickly look up redshift quantum problems, and you'll see that there are issues with that. I think even Hubble himself was moving away from redshift analysis before he died, as I've mentioned before. Redshift quanta problems. I don't think you can read it in 5 minutes, but you can try. And then you have problems. There are problems with redshift theory. Big problems with it. Some quasars put out light, which basically negates all of that, and makes us think twice. So it's not a slam dunk at all. On the other hand, the universe does seem older than, let's say, the Christian 6,000 years, if you're going by the Bible, which some anti-evolutionists do. It would appear that there are star systems out there which are far, far older, even if it's just hundreds of thousands of years. So I'm not really going to argue against redshift at this point in time, but I still say that the reason we have this idea of 13.5 billion years is because in the last 30 years, it's been calculated that's the amount of time that is needed for life to have arisen spontaneously. Now, that's number one. Then what they're looking for in CERN, what is CERN collider?
They're looking for
the God particle and all that.
It's not the God particle, because they thought the Higgs boson was a
Higgs boson.
Well, they've discovered that. The one that's still
the Higgs boson. There are questions again, but unfortunately, the people who don't agree can't get the word out. You have to go looking for it. So create another tab in your browser and do Higgs boson problems, and you find
because
that
it's not the same weight as what they expected. So
there are other issues, but the point is, even Mr. Higgs himself didn't look. I watched the video. I think I watched it live. I was very lucky or something. I don't know why. I was lucky. I was watching it live when they supposedly found it. I've got to go to look for the video. Look at his face. He's not convinced. I'll swear on
just by looking at his face.
Just by looking at his face,
Oh.
He looked embarrassed and unconvinced, and he wished he was somewhere else. And if I met him face to face, I'd still show him that video and say, "Tell him what was going on and be honest." Upon pain of going insane if you're telling lies. And he's just going to have to own up to that. Yeah, no. He's not convinced at all. But, everybody was happy. Everybody was clapping. What could he say? You haven't found it? He couldn't.
Well,
then they did some experiments.
Wasn't it repeated?
As I understand it, what they found is they found something, but it's questionable what it is. And you can repeat it, and it's still questionable. It's like the gravity waves. Somebody was saying, he's on YouTube. I don't know where the video is on YouTube. Maybe you have to look on YouTube for gravitational wave problems or something like that. I don't know. This guy is a scientist. He's got all the degrees that you ask for all the time. He's got all of that. He's published. He's blah, blah, blah. And he was saying, this doesn't make any sense. And he was explaining stuff that I myself thought that, hold on, if a gravity wave hits your experiment, won't it uniformly affect all the elements of your experiment? How are you, what's the word? Not accounting. There's a word for it in science. How are you controlling? That's the word. How are you controlling for that?
Mhm.
How are you controlling for the fact that the things that are actually participating in the experiment are also being affected by the gravity wave? Nothing.
Well, I'm not sure about
Silence,
nothing,
tumbleweed.
because a lot of these experiments for gravity waves are done deep underground with special facilities in order so that they're not interfered with. And they have made allowances for the effect on the other materials there. Yes, of course they have.
If you are using something that is sensitive enough to measure a bend in light under the
This isn't light, remember. You can measure this. Light is a problem because there's nothing faster than light that we're aware of. So light, anything to do with light is a problem, but a wave is not light.
If you are measuring the bend in a photon of light due to the presence of a gravity wave, and you've got an experiment set up that's that sensitive, how have you controlled, question still stands, how have you controlled for the instruments being robust and impervious to the same gravity wave? That's what this guy was saying, the guy on YouTube. He's a scientist, and he's a big brain and all that. And he was basically asking the same question that I've asked. And I said, how did you control for that? How do you know that the instruments themselves didn't warp and bend slightly, as you'd expect them to, if they're that sensitive? How did you control for that? Tumbleweed.
It's not tumbleweed.
Well, when I say tumbleweed, I mean he didn't get an answer, and I don't think I've got an answer. And your thing about being deep down on the ground and all that doesn't really address the issue, because if it's deep underground, and the gravity wave can get there, then it can definitely affect whatever else is measuring stuff deep underground too. So the question stands:
The point,
how are you controlling for that?
Because you're taking the non-gravity wave environment as your baseline, and you're seeing that. So yes, they'll be affected, but then you can see that the change is enough to imply that the gravity wave has had an effect, and it's not just one sensor.
You've missed it. Let me explain to you like this. I'm measuring something with a ruler, okay?
Go on.
So I'm measuring, like you said, the non-gravity wave environment. I'm measuring a table with my ruler, and it's 1 foot long.
Mm-hmm.
Then I expose something which is in the gravity wave environment. I expose it to the gravity wave, and I measure it with my ruler. I'm saying, how do you know my ruler also hasn't been affected? So when I measure 1 foot, how do I know it's really 1 foot? Because even my ruler itself is being affected.
That's not what a gravity wave does.
So I'm asking you, how do you control for that? How are you proving to me that the ruler hasn't changed? And by the way, it's an impossible question, because it must have changed because it's under the same gravity wave.
The gravity wave is a wave. It's not affecting structures other than making them move ever so slightly more than they're already moving.
And the atoms and the molecules and all the things.
It's not to that level.
And the quarks and we know that atoms aren't the big sort of things we were taught in school. We know that they're made up of all these other littler things. So if it's affecting the other things that you're measuring, how do we know it's not affecting in some way the thing, these other things, these instruments?
So do you believe, therefore, that the experiment that they're currently doing in several places around the world with really expensive facilities is all rubbish, done by several countries? It's not one. I
actually do, because that's how scientists make their living. And if they were being completely honest, nobody would give them any money, so they lie. And it's all pigs with their snouts in the trough, all of them. They're shills, basically. They're corporate shills. I've called them that to their faces. Well, not to their faces, but I've called them that before in our podcast, because there are certain. I mean, there are these other scientists who aren't corporate shills, who are making all these complaints that Tayo's making, but they're just being shut out because it's all about consensus now. They are honest people. Not every scientist, everybody with a lab coat is a lying toe rag. There's a document running around. Last time I saw it, they had 155 or 150, 100 and whatever signatures of people like the president of the Academy of Science, really serious people like this, head of MIT's physics lab, signing that they didn't believe in that there was sufficient evidence to warrant a belief in Darwinism.
You keep going back to that now.
I'm trying to say they signed it. It just proves that when I say scientists are a load of low-life lying toe rags, I can never mean all of them, because I am aware that some of them aren't. That's the reason I'm bringing it up. I am aware that some scientists are very, very skeptical about the Higgs boson. They're very, very skeptical about the gravity wave thing. By the way, I'm sure you've seen this image, and I'm sure members of our audience, you've seen this image of the so-called background wave. The background temperature of the universe. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
You see it?
Yeah.
Do you know that was made up? Are you aware of this?
Yeah.
You're aware that was made up, that it's no such thing, that they had to actually visualize it and play with the numbers and to set it up to look like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then you publish that, and then do you think that the normies know that it's hogwash?
Most people don't, but the scientists did.
Well, why
the peer review came in and said that is not based on truth.
But why is it published? Why is it in front of
It's like exactly what you said. Oh, well, everyone should be able to publish it. And in this day and age, because of the internet, that's exactly what is happening. People are publishing stuff without peer review, and guess what? It's almost starting to be accepted as the norm, when in fact that information is a load of hogwash. But when they go via the proper system, where nothing is published until it has been peer reviewed.
I don't think your recollection is correct. I believe that was actually published properly, and then it was other people who said, hold on a second. I think that was actually published in a peer-reviewed journal. I think it was published in Science magazine. What was in that? Background radiation, background, sciencefocus.com, australiascience.com, space.fm. Anyway, there are lots of so-called peer-reviewed journals. So what I'm going to say to the audience is, just type this out, open quotes, Science magazine, close quotes, background radiation. Sorry, do a search for that and go to the images tab, and you'll see that there are many peer-reviewed journals that feature that image, the green-blue image that looks like an oval and is known to be a nonsense image. I will concede one thing, Tony. It's not coming up in Science magazine. I'll concede that. But it is coming out of things like, no. It is coming out from other places, other peer-reviewed journals. So I'm going to do a search after this. We've ended this podcast afterwards, because I'm pretty sure it did come out in a couple of well-respected journals. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that's. I mean, to be honest, that's me done, because I'm still not of the opinion that what you say is true. So you say that is science a fact-based or opinion-based methodology? I still think there's still enough good people out there who genuinely produce science based on proper scientific methodology, and it's peer reviewed before it's produced. Now, there are some ambiguities, like you said, on the theory of evolution, because there doesn't seem to be very much evidence anywhere. And yes, there are many questions as to how we came about, but it isn't ideal, neither of them, or any of the solutions. But that's what we had at the time, and it looked correct. As science is progressing, more and more questions are being asked. And yeah, I think there could be a time where we have to reconsider the theory of evolution, of whether it is actually correct or not, because there's so many holes being found. But that one area does not undermine the rest of science, where it is peer reviewed, it is checked, it is repeated, and that's what science is on. So the title that we picked for today's show, is it science fact-based or opinion-based? I'm still going that it is fact-based for the majority of the evidence and science that is produced.
And I am saying that the mere fact that you're asking for peer-reviewed means that you are actually falling for the trap, and apparently unknowingly you are conceding this argument. Now, you may not agree that you're conceding it, but I hope that the audience members will recognize that your position is contradictory and flawed. If you're insisting on peer review, then you are saying that it has to be consensus. It has to be based on consensus.
No,
All I'm saying is,
having it double checked, so what I produce is correct, where it's peer reviewed. Or did you?
All I'm saying is, you have to put out something that is an experiment, and that's all you need to put out. And then we, or someone else, or wherever it is, will do the work to repeat the experiment and publish those results. And that's nothing to do with consensus.
No, it's
that
not.
Is testing. That's
testing. Yes, exactly.
But you're saying peer review, because if you peer review something that isn't an experiment, it's just an idea, such as, I could go back to it again, such as evolution, and you say, yeah, that sounds like a doable idea. I mean, how is it that all these things go out into journals? Lucy, very famous set of bones, man called Lucy, found in 1965 in the old valley, whatever. Found in Tanzania in the 60s, I think 65.
Was supposed to be the missing link.
Was supposed to be the missing link. And all that was in peer-reviewed journals for years.
But that was based on the evidence that they had at the time.
Well, it wasn't based on evidence, obviously. It was based on speculation. That's the whole point. That's why the peer-reviewed journals could take it. If it was based on evidence, people would have straight away said, hang on, this isn't the missing link. That's Tayo's point. That it's got to boil down to experiment. Where's the experiment to show that it's the missing link? There isn't one. Ergo, shut up about it. So
you're saying, contrary to what you said that they should put it out there anyway and then let other people see.
No, I said you put out experiments, and this said you put out speculation.
Well, hold on. They put out this weird looking bone structure, which was not anything similar to anything else. And before they had the test, what, you're going to sit on it? No, they're going to report about it. Look at this. This could be the missing link. And that's how it was portrayed.
They didn't say it could be the missing link.
Yes,
they said it was the missing link.
It was not. It was could be the missing link.
Anyway,
it was never said.
Anyway, they put it out. They said, we have found the missing link. This is meet your ancestor, I believe, was the actual Nature report headline. Meet your ancestor.
That's
all right.
right.
So that's not an if, when, buts, or however. That's meet your ancestor.
That was not an absolute. It was
meet
not.
your ancestor isn't an accident. So what is semantics now? What are they arguing?
To make a headline, they're still got to sell.
So much for science.
Have you got a final point?
Well, I was trying to actually land my final point. That if you're asking for peer review, if any belief in a peer review system is automatically seeking consensus. It's not seeking repeatable experiments.
But that's how the peer review system works.
That is not how it works.
Years.
That is not how it works. How it works was, when in the time of Boyle and people like that, they'll publish the experiments, and other people would pick it up. Those magazines would publish the experiments, other people would confirm it, and then you get Boyle's law. That's how it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to work that you publish a picture of a set of odd-looking bones, and then you idly, by the way, presuppose that evolution is true when you say meet your ancestors. Because if you don't presuppose that, why are you looking at an ancestor of man instead of at the bones of an animal? Why would you even think that?
Because
where's your experiment?
A headline. It's how you're proposing they do science, which isn't right.
Which isn't right, did you say?
No.
Oh, okay, fine. So that's it. You agree with me. Let's come by consensus. And to make my final point, anybody else with peer-reviewed journals has missed the target by a country mile. Peer-reviewed journals is another way of implementing and enforcing consensus. That's where I'm coming from.
Well, we think we'll have to, agree to disagree, because that's how you do good science. When other people can repeat what you've done, whether your analysis, your experimentation, your whatever it is you've done, then there's verification that what you've done is correct. So that means the more verification you can get that your process were followed correctly, the more that theory could be based. It's not just because I put it out there. I need to have it verified, because I could be flawed in the way I've designed my evidence or the way I've collected my information. It could be flawed. It could be biased. So having it reviewed by others to ensure that what I've said actually makes sense, that's what we're asking for. Not anything else. It's the fact that they are then seeing the experiment or the whatever, the testing that I've done, and it can be corroborated. That's all.
No,
not consensus.
That isn't all.
Okay.
Experiments have to be published somewhere. If you publish experiments into a peer-reviewed journal, you could just publish a white paper, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and that's what's happened.
But you were saying it has to be a peer-reviewed journal. And here's something called the BMJ, which I don't know what BMJ actually stands for. The BMJ is online, intended for healthcare professionals, it says. Okay, I don't know what BMJ stands for. But what I did was I did...
Journal.
Oh, British Medical Journal. And if you do bmj.com, oh dear, this is hard to say on the podcast.
No, don't.
BMJ.
Just talk about it rather than where it is, yeah?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll bang it into our Facebook page and you can have a look there.
Okay.
Well, problems with peer review. Several recent high-profile cases have raised questions about the effectiveness of peer review in ensuring the quality of published research. Because there are biases. Of course there are. That's the whole point of doing it.
But
when somebody publishes a white paper, has got his experiment in, if it was like you said earlier, a lot of people will come up and say, yeah, experiment is flawed because of this, that, and the other. Just like I'm saying that the guy who unfortunately had it published on YouTube rather than in one of your famous peer-reviewed journals about the fundamental flaw in the gravity wave experiments. Which is a shame. He should be able to get his word out.
He should do.
But he can't.
He can.
Because he can't. Because there's consensus. And the consensus of the people in running those journals, they don't want anybody messing with their meal ticket.
Okay.
It's probably one of the problems of peer review.
Anyway,
journals.
We really need to knock this on the head because we have reached the end of the show for another week.